What's up everybody, Ryco here. Well, you all enjoyed part 1, and here's part 2. Tearlaments taking locals by storm. That's right, this deck can't be killed, and it's fantastic. Although Shifter somehow still is legal, this deck can still do some cool things. So, let's hop into the last few matches of the locals and see how we do. Now, time for round 3. I win the dice roll, which is great, and my hand is pretty good as well. But unfortunately, our opponent had the dreaded double turn skip hand trap, Dimension Shifter. Fun. Normally, I would simply scoop here, as Tearlament folds under Shifter. However, I'm unsure as to what my opponent is playing, so I decide to simply set a monster and pass turn, hoping not to be OTK'd. My opponent starts off with Terraforming, adding the Goaty field spell. This is gonna be fun. Now, I'm pretty unfamiliar with Goaty, but I know it could be rather difficult for them to OTK, so I'm feeling pretty confident. My opponent begins to combo off, synchro summoning the level 6, which banishes one from their deck, allowing them essentially to gain access to their full setup. Luckily, they cannot OTK and simply set up the ability to quick synchro on my turn. They pass turn to me, and after they float back into their 2 Goaties during my standby, I proceed to my main phase, activating Foolish Goods, dumping Rainbow Bridge to the grave. I then use Imseti's Infect in hand to search for Sark and chain Rainbow Bridge. A lot of pluses here. Definitely a lot of pluses. I proceed to add Purrely, the Turtle, King Sark, and draw a card. I figure it's at this point that I should start baiting out some of his interactions, so I activate Sark, summon Imseti to the field, use Sark to dump Happy, then special Happy. Resolution of Happy Summon, our opponent decides to quick synchro, and, using the effect of one of his boss monsters, banishes all cards on the field. Given that we still have Purrely in hand, I'm not too worried at this point. On resolution of the field wipe, I activate Planet, searching Rhino, and then proceed to use Mothman in hand. Time for some more Gamba, let's go. Our opponent hits Solic. We special Moth, draw a card, and use Solic's effect to add Tier Cash. But before committing to a Rhino summon, I decide to use Tier Cash first to see what I mill. And I hit Nessie, Planet, and luckily, a Havness. Havness will use her effect, fusing into Garura, which then gives me plenty of damage to attack for game, given the attack boost of Purrely. Time for game 2. My opponent decides to go first, and luckily, he doesn't open Dimension Shifter. Let's go! Meanwhile, our hand is absolutely stacked, and I have Purrely, the Horus Field spell, Scream, Super Poly, and Mally. Pretty good. My opponent combos off, setting up a rather impressive field before passing turn to me. During my standby, he specials back the 2 Goaties that allow him to quick synchro, to which I immediately decide to use Super Poly, clearing those 2 interruptions while putting a Garura on the field and a Mally in the grave to threaten Beatrice right away. My opponent, still in the standby, then proceeds to banish my Garura, synchro summon into a bigger fish, there's always a bigger fish, and searches the monster that can summon from hand. We finally continue to the main phase, where I begin by using Foolish Goods, dumping Rainbow Bridge. Rainbow Bridge then gets me the Horus Field spell and the OP Turtle, and the Horus Field spell grabs Imseti, putting the King Sark back on the bottom of the deck. Imseti then grabs the same Sark, plus a draw, and now we can begin to pop off. Imseti summons back because of the field spell counting as Sark, then I begin to activate the original King Sark, dumping and special summoning Happy. I then activate Planet, grabbing Rhino, and proceed to use Mally's effect to summon another from the deck. As I don't want to mill the extra copy of Mally with Scream, because knowing my luck I probably would. I then proceed to resolve one of my favorite sequences in the game. Normal Rhino Heart, chainlink 1 Rhino Heart, chainlink 2 Scream. Feels so good. We mill a Solic, luckily, and dump a Havness, using both effects. Solic will pick us up a Tier Cash, and Havness will fuse into Kaleido. On the res of the summon, we can start truly picking apart of the board, as Kaleido will spin back a card and Planet will pop a card. To push for more damage as an attempt to OTK, I summon Tier Cash, mill 3, and hit another Tier Cash. Mill 2 more, and just as I think the Gamba didn't pay off, my last mill ended up being Purrely. Sometimes we're just nice like that. Purrely will use the effect to fuse, summoning a Mud Dragon in the EMZ, As we attempt to enter battle, our opponent summons the other goatee from hand, but even with his monsters on field, we're able to push for the OTK. Finally, the last round of the day, and we're undefeated. We're going against Purrely. This matchup can be rather frightening, not gonna lie. However, we won the dice roll and drew a good hand, so I'm pretty confident. I proceed to combo, and unfortunately, our mills were pretty bad, not gonna lie. I set up the best possible board I can manage, being Imseti, Little Knight, Winda, and a Shuffler engrave. I'm praying that my opponent doesn't have an imperm for the Winda. And when he begins the main phase by activating Prosperity, I was definitely scared. And of course, the fifth card to be revealed was Imperm, which he grabs right away. He proceeds to use Imperm on Winda, then activates the Purrely field spell, essentially rendering Little Knight useless as I won't be able to target his special summon cats. He proceeds to combo off, and when he uses the Black Cat's effect to target a spell in the grave, luckily I had the Shuffler to stop the summon. However, this still wasn't enough, as my opponent gets to grab Delicious Memory from the continuous spell, summons a white cat, and then excavates a pretty memory from the same cat. He then proceeds to summon Beauty, and uses its effect to attach my King Sark as material to prevent follow-up. He then proceeds to the battle phase, crashing his Beauty in order to summon another cat from the deck and add back 3 spells from the grave. Going into main 2, he then proceeds to make a Plump and uses this effect along with spell after spell after spell until he ends up with a 10 mat Noir that will draw 4 on my turn. It's absolutely insane. Although I get my Little Knight back and attempt to play a little bit, I realize there's no real way to out that thick cat, so I scoop it up and decide to move to game 2. That thick cat was way too OP. Moving on to game 2, I decide to go first and open pretty well. I start off by summoning Fenrir, then using Imseti right after to search King Sark. This way, if I get drolled, I can at least do something with the King Sark. He doesn't droll me, so I use Fenrir to search Tier Cache on resolution. I then proceed to activate King Sark, summoning both Horus monsters and making a zombie vampire. This unfortunately gets effect veilered, so I continue my plays by using Shiren, hoping to mill something good. Shiren unfortunately whiffs, so I proceed to use Tier Cache, and thankfully I hit a Trivikarma. I grab Scream, activate it, and link into a Little Knight, proceeding to mill 3 more. And again, I hit nothing. I then decide to normal Rhinoheart, dump a Havness, and fuse into Mud Dragon. I then make Redoer, overlaying the Shiren and Mud Dragon, and proceed to pass turn. Redoer in the standby phase grabs a spell, which is definitely free value. My opponent then begins by activating the field spell, which of course he hard drew, and uses the hard drawn Delicious Memory as well to summon a cat from the deck. This resolves, triggering my Scream, and thankfully I mill a Shuffler and a Soliq, which the Soliq will then grab me Tier Cache. I'm still pretty much in a pickle here though, as all of his special summon cats will be untargetable because of the field spell. He then proceeds to normal Diviner and use the effect to dump a Shuffler. This man is on a whole nother level. This essentially forces my Shuffler, which then forces his Shuffler, and for some reason I do misplay here, it does happen, as I somehow forgot to shuffle back his Delicious Memory that's in the grave. Yes, it was right under the shifter, and I just didn't want to touch that card, so I just didn't see it. And I forgot about it. He then uses the Black Cat to summon Plump, and immediately after, my opponent activates my friend Purrely, which I know I pretty much have to get rid of. So I use Redo effect, which will draw me a card and allow me to use Shiren's effect to fuse. I fuse into Kaleido, and spin back his my friend Purrely. He then uses Plump on resolution, attaching 2 spells, and proceeds to enter battle phase. He attacks my Fenrir, taking some damage and making a Zeus in the main phase too. He uses Zeus, and as I was declaring chain links from the tier card sent to grave, time was called. This round went by so fast. We were having a good game, and although I wasn't too much in a winning position, it didn't feel like I was so far behind to where it was just pointless. But yeah, time was called. We were both unaware of the time, and given the fact that it's locals, it's not the biggest deal in the world. But if my opponent would have known the time, I'm sure he would not have attacked into the Fenrir. Because I lost game 1 and won game 2 because of time, we ended up with a tie. As I was packing up my stuff, I decided to open up my OTS packs from prizing. And out of the second pack opened, I pulled a Chaos Angel. Let's go. Definitely a great pull. Not gonna lie, I wish it was a Duster, as this is now the second Chaos Angel I've pulled, but honestly, I can't complain. So, out of the 4 rounds played, my final record was 3 wins and 1 tie. Tearlaments is still a very powerful deck, and although it's not as consistent as it used to be, with correct sequencing and a little bit of luck, this deck can absolutely steamroll other decks and take a lot of wins. Unless they shifter you, of course. If you all enjoyed this kind of video, let me know in the comments below. I'm curious to know what you all think. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, peace.